Hello, welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. In this presentation, I'll be continuing our study on the mark of the beast by focusing on the latter part of Revelation chapter 30. In the previous presentation, we looked at the first part of Revelation 13, where John saw a beast that rose up out of the sea, which we identified as a revived Roman Catholic Church, or the papacy, led by the Pope. However, in this presentation, we will look at the final part of Revelation 13, where John in vision also saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And this is what we read in Revelation 13, verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So in contrast to the papal power which arose out of the densely populated area of Europe around the Mediterranean Sea, this second beast of Revelation 13 rose up out of a sparsely populated area of the earth. The opposite of the earth is the sea, as can be seen below. Genesis 1 verse 9 and 10 tells us about the creation story. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called these seas. And God saw that it was good. So you can see that the opposite of the earth is the sea. Juxtapose that now with Revelation 17 verse 15, which tells us what the waters represent symbolically. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. This second beast of Revelation 13 had two horns like a lamb. And the nation described in this section is none other than the United States of America. So let's make that very clear. The second beast of Revelation 13 is speaking specifically about the United States of America, the USA, which will cause the world to worship the first beast, who is the papacy. So here we are seeing the flag of the United States. So it cannot be in any doubt that this is referring to the United States of America. I'm being very bold in making this statement. The USA declared its independence on July 4th, 1776. And by 1790, all 13 colonies had ratified the Constitution. This was just before the first beast, the papacy, received its deadly wound in 1798, 8 years before. The United States was described as having two horns like a lamb to symbolize its innocence and youthfulness as a nation, with the horns representing two great principles, and these principles are civil liberty and religious liberty. America also established a system of governance and religion based on two fundamental principles, and these are republicanism and Protestantism, which was enshrined in the Constitution, and these have been the bedrock of the nation since its inception. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution is commonly called the Guarantee Clause, and it reads as follows, and I quote, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, end of quote. So the United States established a system of governance, and it was a republican form of government. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution provides the necessary guarantee of civil liberty, because the framers of the Constitution wanted a government that served its people rather than enslaving them, which is what they were running away from when they came to America from Europe. Article 6 of the Constitution clearly prohibits religious tests for serving in public office. And this is what it states, and I quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States, end of quote. And this is the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Section 3. So here you are seeing that America was founded upon two great principles, civil liberty and religious liberty. Article 6, Section 3 of the Constitution speaks to the separation of church and state, because the framers also want to allow for freedom of conscience and expression. The pilgrims who came to America wanted a government of the people, for the people, and elected by the people, because they did not desire a king as they had in Europe, and wanted the right to worship according to the dictates of their own consciences. Therefore, these articles were placed as safeguards in the Constitution to ensure that America had a government without a king and a church without a pope, with none controlling the other. This beast had two horns like a lamb, which means that it is Christ-like, since the word lamb appears 27 times in the book of Revelation alone. And with the exception of Revelation 13, verse 11, it is always used in reference to Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. So when the Bible describes this second beast as having two horns like a lamb, it is saying that this nation is Christ-like. However, it did not end there. It says that it spake as a dragon. However, the scripture then says that the United States, though Christ-like, speaks as a dragon. And history has shown that America has always been two-faced in its approach, and it is never afraid to use force to achieve its desired purposes. The Christ-like nature of the United States of America can be seen in the very words of the Declaration of Independence, which was promulgated on July 4, 1776, and signed by John Hancock, the President of the Congress. So this is a screenshot of the original Declaration of Independence in Congress, July 4, 1776, a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. And here are the words of the Declaration of Independence. It says the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So they are now making a statement, a declaration that they are now going separate from England, from Britain. Notice what they stated, and this is in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. They said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So notice the Christ-like sentiments mentioned by the founding fathers. And conclusion of the Declaration of Independence, and as you can see below, all the men that signed the Declaration of Independence, they ended by saying this: "We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, that is God, for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." End of quote. So that is the conclusion of the Declaration of Independence. And here you're seeing all the men who signed the Declaration of Independence from the 13 colonies that made up the United States at the time of their independence. So these are their original signatures written by hand, and these are the names of the men and the respective colonies from which they came, or states from which they came. So notice the Christ-like sentiment that was espoused by the framers of the Constitution and the men that wrote the Declaration of Independence. They stated, all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, and notice in particular, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, America spake and acted like a dragon from its very inception. So those words are good words, noble words, that all men are created equal, because all men were created equal by God. But notice what happened. From its founding in 1776 until 1865, the 13 colonies that formed the United States participated and engaged in human chattel slavery of Africans, which went against the very sentiments expressed in the Declaration of Independence. So on one hand, they were saying that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights by their creator. And on the other hand, they are engaged in and participated in the sale of men as slaves. So that is why the Bible describes this second beast as having 2 horns like a lamb, Christ-like, but spake as a dragon. So they are saying one thing, but they are doing another thing. So the scriptures tell us clearly that America has always been two-faced. They appear to be Christ-like, but they act and speak like a dragon. And we all know who the dragon is, the devil and Satan. So notice on screen you are seeing torturing American citizens, page 129. A slave owner whipping a slave. He's tied on a tree and he's being whipped. And in the middle of the screen, you're seeing the effects, the scar tissues of a slave who was badly beaten. And on the far right, you're seeing that on Thursday, March 25, 1858, at 12 o'clock, will be sold in the rotunda of the St. Louis Hotel, slaves. 13 slaves were listed here for sale. So it is clear that America has had a history of speaking like a dragon and acting like a dragon, even though they appear to be Christ-like. Additionally, on March 28, 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which resulted in the forced relocation of thousands of native Indians from their ancestral lands. Why? Because the white settlers in America coveted the Indians' fertile farmlands. Their lands were lucrative, and they coveted the lands, and Congress, the legislative arm of the United States, passed the Indian Removal Act and forced these native Indians from their ancestral lands. That is speaking and acting like a dragon. Over 50,000 native Indians were forced to abandon their homes, sometimes with the aid of the US military, and relocated to quote-unquote Indian territory, an area that later became the state of Oklahoma. Here on screen, you're seeing in green here, Indian lands before the relocation. So the Indians were occupied this section, these sections in the darker shade green, and these native Indians were the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Choctaw. And they were forced to relocate from their territories in Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi, and sent all the way over into this so-called area known as the Indian Territory. So America has a history of speaking and acting like a dragon, which goes against the very words and sentiments expressed in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equally and that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, including liberty and the pursuit of happiness. But the Americans over the years have shown that they have spoken and acted like a dragon, even though they seem to be Christ-like. The trek from their homeland in the southeast to quote-unquote Indian territory became known as the Trail of Tears, since many of these native Indians died along the way due to starvation, disease, and exposure to extreme weather conditions. So there are a lot of tears along the trek. Therefore, the United States of America has had a long history of turning against the great principles espoused by the founding fathers when it is expedient to do so. And the same thing will happen again during the Mark of the Beast crisis. The descendants of the Pilgrims have forgotten that their forefathers came to the United States of America because they were fleeing papal persecution and that they fought for the right to have religious freedom. In the near future, viewers, the United States of America will abandon, and I repeat, will abandon the very principle of religious freedom and repudiate its Constitution and the Bill of Rights by discarding those fundamental principles upon which the nation was built. The stage is being set, and the stage has been set. And in 2016, when Barack Obama was president of the United States, there were 6 Catholics and 3 Jewish justices on the 9-member Supreme Court of the United States. This means that the Catholics have 66% of the votes and therefore have the balance of power to push through any decisions they want made, since the Catholic Church already has control over the justice system of America. This balance of power brings to mind a statement made by Archbishop James Edward Quigley, which was reported by the Chicago Daily Tribune in 1903. And this is what he said, and I quote, "When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world." End of quote. This is a very profound statement. This is the article where James Edward Quigley was quoted. The Chicago Daily Tribune, Tuesday, May 5, 1903. I've highlighted it in red, and this is a screenshot of what is in that article. Quigley, as an optimist, sees wonderful growth of Roman Catholic Church. The article starts by saying, standing the only man among 800 women, the Archbishop declares he has been deeply impressed by the progressive spirit of the West. Forecast the time when the religion he represents, which is Roman Catholic Church, will lead the world. Notice what he said, and I quote, "Since I have seen the Western parochial schools, I have come to the conclusion that in 50 years, if things go on as I see they are going on at present, the Catholic Church will actually own the West." End of quote. And notice what he was also quoted as saying, America to rule the world. Within 20 years, and this is from 1903 that this article was written, within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. That's America. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. The West will dominate the country, and what I have seen of the Western parochial schools has proved that the generation which follows us will be exclusively Catholic. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. So that is what James Edward Quigley prophesied will happen. Viewers, as at 2023, the demographic of the SCOTUS, which is the Supreme Court of the United States, remains almost the same because of the 9 justices. 6 are Roman Catholic, 1 is Jewish, 1 is Protestant, and Neil Gorsuch, who was raised as a Catholic, now considers himself to be an Episcopalian. Viewers, Protestants and Episcopalian are daughters of the Catholic Church. So in essence, there are really 8 Catholics on the Supreme Court, because what is happening now in America and around the world is that the Catholic Church is mending fences with all the Protestant churches, calling back their daughters to come home. So the Protestant churches have long protested, but one thing is of note, is that the one thing that they have in common is that they observe Sunday. And Sunday is going to play a very important role in the Mark of the Beast crisis, because the Mark of the Beast is global enforced Sunday worship. So Protestants around the world have protested against the Roman Catholic Church, but they have kept one thing in common with the Roman Catholic Church, and that is the observance of Sunday as the day of worship. So effectively, there are 8 Roman Catholics on the US Supreme Court and 1 Jewish. So viewers, the stage is already set for the Mark of the Beast to be rolled out. It's just a matter of time. So here is the current justices of the Supreme Court. You have the Chief Justice, John Roberts. He is Roman Catholic. He was appointed by George W. Bush in 2005. Second person is Clarence Thomas. He's the longest serving justice on the Supreme Court at present. He's also Roman Catholic. He has been on the court since 1991, 31 years ago. Third person, who is also Roman Catholic, is Samuel Alito. He's of Italian heritage. The fourth Roman Catholic is Sonia Sotomayor. The fifth justice is Elena Kagan. She is Jewish. And Neil Gorsuch, he was raised a Roman Catholic, but he now considers himself to be an Episcopalian. Brett Kavanaugh is also Roman Catholic. Amy Coney Barrett is also Roman Catholic. These two persons were appointed by Donald Trump when he was the president of the United States. They were appointed in 2018 and 2020 respectively. And the final person that makes up the 9-member Supreme Court is Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was appointed by President Biden on June 30, 2022, and she is a Protestant. So the stage has been set. So you have 6 Roman Catholic, one who was raised as a Roman Catholic, but is now an Episcopalian, who is Neil Gorsuch. And you also have Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is a Protestant. And then you have Elena Kagan, who is a Jewish person on the Supreme Court. So the United States of America has long been an influential leader in the world in the areas of politics, commerce, and military might. And this second beast will play a pivotal role in the end times, which leads us to Revelation 13, verse 12, which states, "And he, the second beast, exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." So the first beast, or the papacy, once used its power to enforce religious laws, which resulted in the persecution of millions in Europe because they refused to adhere to the teachings of Rome. The time is coming, viewers, when the second beast, the United States, will also exercise all the power of the papacy and will lead the whole world to worship the first beast, because the dragon or Satan is the controlling power behind both beasts in Revelation 13. There is also a startling resemblance and similarity between the architectural design of the headquarters of the first beast, that's the Vatican, and the power center of the second beast, which is Congress. Notice on screen you are seeing the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And notice the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C. This is the Congress of the United States, and it has a similar shape structure, a dome-shaped architectural design. So you can see that there's a similarity in the design of the Vatican City and the Congress of the United States. And the second beast of Revelation 13, which is the United States, will also exercise the same power as the first beast did during the medieval times. Revelation 13, verse 13 and 14 says this, "And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live." So this two-horned beast, which also represents apostate Protestantism in America, will have the power to perform great miracles. Working in conjunction with Satan, these miracles will convince the world into believing that God has found favor with them, because fire falling from heaven has been used in the past to show God's acceptance, as can be seen in the verses below. Notice what happened in 2 Chronicles 7, verse 1. This is when Solomon dedicated the temple to God. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of Jehovah filled the house. Notice as well that Elijah proved that he had God's favor. Notice what happened in 1 Kings 18, verse 24 onwards. This is when Elijah had a showdown on Mount Carmel with the false prophets of Jezebel, the false prophets of Baal. And the issue was over worship. The issue was, who are they going to worship, and which God was indeed the true God? Elijah said to them, to the false prophets of Baal, he said, "Call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of Jehovah. And the God that answered by fire, let him be God." So it was a showdown as to who was the real God, who was the true God. And all the people answered and said, "It is well spoken." And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, choose you one bullock for yourselves, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call on the name of your gods, but put no fire under. And they took the bullock which was given them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal, from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he's talking, or he's pursuing, or he's in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awaked. And they cried aloud, and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets, till the blood gushed out upon them. And it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. And he repaired the altar of Jehovah that was broken down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of Jehovah came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of Jehovah. And he made a trench above the altar, as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bullock in pieces, and laid him on the wood, and said, fill 4 barrels with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. And he said, do it the second time. And they did it the second time. And he said, do it the third time. And they did it the third time. And the water ran round about the altar. And he filled the trench also with water. And notice what Elijah did. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Jehovah, God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Jehovah, hear me, that this people may know that thou art Jehovah, God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again. And notice what happened. Then the fire of Jehovah fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Jehovah, he is the God. Jehovah, he is the God. So notice, viewers, it was when all the people saw the miracle of the fire from heaven that they were convinced that Jehovah is God. Why? Because seeing is believing. And the scriptures tell us in Revelation 13 that the second beast, working in conjunction with Satan, will cause fire to fall from heaven and deceive the whole world. Satan will again falsely represent God by impersonating the miracle of fire falling from heaven to deceive those that dwell on the earth, as he has done in the past. When did he do this? He did this in the book of Job. Job chapter 1 in particular. Notice what happened to Job. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. So he was interceding on behalf of his children. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Jehovah, and Satan came also among them. And Jehovah said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered Jehovah and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. So he was claiming ownership over the earth, because the earth belonged to him at this point in time, because Adam yielded the earth to him when he sinned. And Jehovah said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered Jehovah and said, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And Jehovah said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of Jehovah. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. So notice what the devil is going to do. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabians fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, Notice this now, the fire of God is fallen from heaven. So the devil caused fire to fall from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, The Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. Jehovah gave, and Jehovah had taken away. Blessed be the name of Jehovah. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. So viewers, notice that Satan was the person behind all the calamities that had befallen Job, even though it was described as the fire of God, because the devil impersonated what God has done in the past. Fire falling from heaven is an act of God. But what the devil did was to cause fire to fall from heaven and destroyed Job's livestock, because he was trying to deceive Job into thinking that God was behind all these atrocities. So the devil in the end time will use the same strategy to cause fire to fall from heaven, so that he will deceive the whole earth into believing that God has found favor with this demonic cause. However, Job was not deceived, because he did not blame God for his predicament, but his friends were deceived by the machinations of the devil. And they even accused Job of being a sinner and claimed that his suffering was as a result of God's judgment. Viewers, miracles are used to give authenticity. And when the earth is deceived, Protestants in America will convince the world to make an image to the first beast, who is the papacy, to reflect the same level of intolerance of the papal church during the medieval times, when the papacy held sway between 538 AD and 1798, the period of the Dark Ages. The image of the beast, viewers, is none other than a unification of church and state, which will allow the United States of America to use its power and influence to legislate religious laws and persuade other world governments to do the same. So the image of the beast is simply the union of church and state, and this will be led by America, the second beast of Revelation 13. Here you can see on screen a picture of President Donald Trump in the Oval Office in the White House, and surrounding him are evangelical church leaders who were praying for him. So you can see that the framers of the Constitution established a system where there was a separation of church and state. And you can see gradually that the union of church and state is being formed. The evangelicals were in full support of Donald Trump's presidency. And you can see them here uniting with him. So there's a unification of church and state taking place here. This is historic, and this is what the scriptures have foretold. Revelation 13, verse 15. And he, the second beast of Revelation 13, the United States, had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So viewers, The central issue around the mark of the beast is worship. It is worship, worship, worship. And a death decree will be issued against those who refuse to worship the first beast, the papacy. In the previous presentation, we looked at Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were being forced upon the pain of death to worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And when they refused to comply, they were cast into the burning fire furnace. The same thing will happen in the last days. A death decree will be issued against those who refuse to comply and worship the beast and his image and accept the mark of the beast. Scripture is absolutely clear. The book of Daniel gives us the examples in the past that when people remained faithful to God, they were persecuted and they faced a death decree. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den in Daniel chapter 6 because he refused to bow down and pray to any man. A death decree was issued and he was thrown to the lions because it went against the very law of God. And the only way that the deceivers who concocted this plot to get rid of Daniel could achieve their purpose, they knew that Daniel would remain faithful to the law of his God. And the law stated that you only worship God and God alone. And prayer is an act of worship. So when they were told that they could not pray to any God for 30 days, except the king Darius, they knew that Daniel, as a faithful servant of God, would still continue to pray to his God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the sovereign King of the universe. So Daniel faced a death decree because he refused to comply to the decree that was signed. So the central issue around the mark of the beast is worship. Coercion will be the order of the day, and laws will be enacted and be enforced to gain compliance. America, the second beast, will replicate the papacy by making an image to the papal church, who is the first beast. Laws will be enacted making Sunday a day of rest and worship instead of God's seventh-day Sabbath, as per the fourth commandment. And this will be enforced by a death decree against all those who refuse to comply. The giving of life to the image of the beast refers to speaking and causing. What do I mean? Speak means to legislate, since world governments speak through their laws. Cause means to enforce or have the ability to make citizens comply. This is why we have the saying, the law has teeth, because laws that are enacted must have the necessary enforcement mechanisms in place to ensure compliance. If there are no enforcement, then the law would be toothless and be deemed a law without teeth. Revelation 13, 16, and 17 says this. And he, the second beast, who is leading the world to worship the first beast, calls it all, and it means all. All the world will have to make a decision. And he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. So everybody is included. Everybody will have to make a decision whether to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So there are three things here. Is either you're going to have the mark, or you're going to have the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So every single inhabitant on this earth will be forced to receive a mark in one of two places, their right hand or their forehead. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10 tells us this. Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. So viewers, our hands are what we use to work. So persons will be coerced into accepting the mark in order to support their families and maintain their livelihoods. Receiving the mark in their hand means to be coerced because of the economic sanctions that will be imposed upon the world in order to gain compliance and submission. And you can see, you can remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, many persons lost their jobs. They were terminated, they were fired because they're being forced to take the vaccine. All of this, all of what happened was just a precursor to what is to come. Many persons could not travel unless they had a vaccine passport. This was sanctions being put in place to force people's hand to do what the state wanted to do. But during the mark of the beast crisis, religious laws will be passed and the state will enforce it because the church would be controlling the state and getting the state to do what it wants it to do. So the scriptures are very clear. So viewers, the mark of the beast crisis is soon to be upon us. So every single person in this world will have to make a decision to either accept the mark of the beast or refuse to accept the mark of the beast. There won't be any middle ground. The battle lines will be drawn. It's either you're on the beast side or you're on God's side. So viewers, the scriptures have foretold this, and it must come to pass. Receiving the mark in the forehead represents willing acceptance and conscious choice, since the brain is the organ of the mind, and the frontal lobe is where we make our cognitive decisions or choices and exercise free will. Here you are seeing on screen a picture of the human brain. Here you are seeing the frontal lobe. This is where the forehead is located. This is where we make our conscious decisions. So the mark will be received it's not a physical mark, by the way. It's not a physical mark. The mark, when it speaks about receiving the mark in your forehead, it is speaking about you consciously deciding to take and accept the mark of the beast for one reason or another. It is a matter of conscious choice by individuals. Therefore, the mark of the beast will be received by the world either out of fear of death, meaning you want to be able to support the family and maintain a livelihood, you will accept it in your hand. Or conscious choice, you have decided that you are going to take this mark. You'll receive it in your forehead, and laws will be made to ostracize, just like in COVID, the unvaccinated. Laws will be made to ostracize those who choose to remain faithful to God and His word. This will be done to bring them into submission and subjection. But when this attempt fails, a death decree will be issued to eradicate God's people. So viewers, there will be three main areas of focus in the last days relating to the mark of the beast. One, the mark of the beast itself. And the mark of the beast is globally enforced Sunday worship. Let me be explicitly clear. No one has the mark of the beast now because they worship on Sunday. When Sunday is legislated worldwide, then the mark of the beast will be upon us. So the mark of the beast is enforced Sunday worship, which will be legislated globally, worldwide. So the mark of the beast is globally enforced Sunday worship. That is what the mark of the beast is, because the Catholic Church has stated categorically that Sunday is her mark of authority. God has established that the seventh-day Sabbath is God's holy day. It's a day of rest and worship. But the Roman Catholic Church, who has thought to change times and laws, have established this counterfeit Sabbath, Sunday, which is in direct opposition to God's holy day, the Sabbath. So when Sunday is legislated worldwide as a day of rest and worship, then you can be assured that the mark of the beast crisis is upon us. So the first main area is the legislation of Sunday as a day of worship and rest, which is what they are pushing now all over the world. And the Pope is leading the campaign to make Sunday a day of rest and worship. You will not be able to buy or sell. So this will be the imposition of economic sanctions And this is what America is known for. You can think about the embargo on Cuba. No trading is done with Cuba because of this embargo. So the same thing will happen during the mark of the beast crisis. Those who do not have the mark will not be able to buy or sell. And this is to twist people's arms into receiving the mark. This is what it simply is. The third thing that they will do when the economic sanctions fail is to issue a death decree. And this death decree is to coerce and enforce the mark. So it is simple. The mark of the beast will be legislated worldwide. And for those who refuse to accept the mark, they will not be able to buy or sell. And this is an attempt to get them to submit. And finally, when that doesn't work, as it did not work with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and with Daniel, a death decree was issued. They were thrown to the fire furnace. Daniel was thrown to the lions. Those who refuse to accept the mark will face a death decree, and that is to coerce and enforce the mark. Again, viewers, the mark of the beast is all about worship. Never forget that. It's not about any microchip. It's not about any vaccine. It's not about any barcode, any chip. It is simply about worship. Who you worship, when you worship, and how you worship. It has more to do with whose authority you obey and less to do with a day, because Sunday is just a counterfeit of Sabbath. So while the mark of the beast is enforced Sunday worship, it is not about a day. It is about whose authority you will obey. God has made it very clear that the seventh day Sabbath is his holy day, a day of worship, a day of rest. The Roman Catholic Church has established Sunday as her mark of authority. So if you accede to the Roman Catholic Church's position and accept Sunday in opposition to God's stated day, then you are accepting and showing your allegiance to the beast, and you are worshiping the beast. And ultimately, you are worshiping the devil, because the devil has always wanted worship. He's using the Roman Catholic Church as a proxy to get worship. His entire aim from he was in heaven was to get worship. He said, I will be like the Most High. The Most High is the only being in this universe that ought to be worshipped. And when he came to earth, when he tempted Jesus Christ, he said, all this will I give thee if thou wilt bow down and worship me. It is his one plan, and that is to get worship. So when you show your allegiance to the beast, you're actually worshiping the devil. So you can only worship two beings. Is either you're going to worship the creator, the God of heaven and earth, or you're going to worship the devil, that old serpent, the dragon, who is behind the two beasts in Revelation 13. So the scriptures are very clear. It is less about a day, even though Sunday, enforced Sunday worship is the mark of the beast. It is not so much about the day, but about whose authority you will obey. That much is clear. The devil will use the United States to deceive the earth into giving their allegiance to the beast, and the world will end up worshiping Satan, the controlling power behind the beast, instead of worshiping and obeying God's commandment. Notice this very important principle which the devil knows. Romans 6 verse 16 says this, know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are, to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death or obedience unto righteousness. So when you choose to accept the mark of the beast, you are yielding yourselves to obey the devil, who is behind this whole system. So he knows that when you yield yourselves servants to obey him, you are showing your allegiance. So there are two death decrees relating to the mark of the beast. One from Satan and the other from God. So God also has a death decree, but there's a difference. Satan's death decree is all about coercion and force in order to get worship. God's death decree is a solemn warning to all humanity to avoid the consequence of worshiping the beast and receiving its mark. God is trying his endeavor best to warn humanity not to accept the mark. Because if you do, there's going to be a consequence because you have already made your choice to side with the devil. Notice what God says in Revelation 14, verse 9 to 12. This is a solemn warning. The third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice. Notice it is with a loud voice. And notice the very first word after that. If the devil forces us, God doesn't force. He says, if. So you have a choice. You always have a choice. If any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the two places that you will receive the mark, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. So God has made it very clear that this is the penalty for those who accept the mark. So it is true, there are two death decrees, one from God, one from the devil. The devil is using it to coerce people. God's death decree is just a solemn warning not to accept it, because if you do, there will be consequences. Just as if you don't accept the mark, there will also be consequences, because you will have to face death. It is better to be in the hand of God than to be in the hand of the devil. So you will have to make a choice. There's no escaping that. Every single person will have to make a choice. Are you going to accept God's words, or are you going to accept the devil's lies? So God has a death decree, but it is not to force us to accept anything. It is just a warning against taking the mark, because it says if any man accept the mark, he will have to face the wrath of God, which will be poured out without mixture. Because what you are saying to God in accepting the mark is that you have chosen the devil over your creator. And that God will not let slide. You will have to face the consequences of your choice. The choice is ours to make. Either we worship the beast and face God's wrath, or refuse the mark and face the devil's death decree. And notice, finally, how this verse ends, Revelation 14, verse 12, because this time, the mark of the beast crisis, is a time that is going to require us to be patient and faithful. And here's what the verse says. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So during this time, God is asking his remnant people to be patient, exercise the patience of the saints. It will be a very terrible time. But God is saying, hold on, have patience. What is the patience of the saints? It says, it is they that keep the commandments of God, not accepting the mark, and the faith of Jesus. So viewers, Revelation 13, I look at the second beast, which rises out of the earth, which points to the United States of America, a nation that has the political clout. It is an influential nation in the world, and this nation will lead the entire world into making an image and will force the world to worship the first beast. And America will be the nation that sparks the mark of the beast crisis, because they will convince the world, as they have done. Whatever America says goes, and we know this. They will be the one to initiate the mark of the beast crisis, and they will convince the entire world to do the same, to enforce Sunday as a day of rest. And when that is done, the mark of the beast crisis will be upon us. But God has made it very clear that we should not accept this mark. We should be patient. We should keep his commandments and have the faith of Jesus. Because if we accept the mark, there's only one place that we are certain to end up, and that is in the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. So God has a death decree, but it is not to force anybody against their will. It is a solemn warning against accepting the mark of the beast. So Revelation 13 speaks about two beasts. The first beast, which is the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy led by the Pope, and the second beast is the United States of America, which will cause the entire world to worship the first beast. And the controlling power behind these two beasts is none other than the devil and Satan himself, who is seeking worship. But God has made it very clear what the punishment is for those who accept the mark, the name, or the number of the beast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And may God grant us the power and the will, the strength of mind, not to accept the mark of the beast when it is unveiled. And that will stand firm like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Stand firm like Daniel in refusing to bow to the pressures of the state. Have yourselves a wonderful day.